Right. Shabbos, Aleph Aleph. The types of transfers on the Shabbat are two of which are really reality four, two which are in reality four outside. How is it so? The poor man is standing outside and the householder inside. If the poor man extended his hand inside and placed an object into the householder's hand, or if he took an object from it and brought that object out, the poor man is liable and the householder is exempt. If the householder extended his hand outside, excuse me, and placed an object into the poor man's hand, or if he took an object out of it and brought that object in, the householder is liable and the poor man is exempt. If the poor man extended his hand inside and the outsider took an object from it, or placed an object into it, and he, the poor man, brought that object out, both are exempt. If the householder extended his hand outside and the poor man took an object from it, or placed an object into it, and he, the householder, brought that object in, both are exempt. A person may not sit down before a barber shortly before the time of mincha until he prays. Neither may a person enter a bathhouse nor a tannery, nor may he begin to eat nor to judge, but if he started, he need not interrupt. They must interrupt for the recitation of Shema, but they need not interrupt for tefillah. Okay. All right, one more.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. A tailor may not go out with his needle shouldered before nightfall, lest he forget and go out. Neither may a scribe go out with his pen. One may neither delouse his garments nor read by the light of the lamp. Indeed, they said the teacher may see where the children are reading, but he may not read. Similarly, a zav may not eat with a zava, since he might lead to sin. Okay.
Okay. ואלו מן ההלכות שאמרו בעלייה חנניה ben Chizkiah ben Gurion שעלו לבקרו. So there was a fellow called Hanania ben Chizkiah who was an outstanding sage. And the commentary here fills in some interesting facts about him is that he was a god and in his time the Chachamim uh, were considering putting like taking the Sefer Yechezkel and removing it from the canon, just putting it away because they said there were certain problematic psukim, and we read the part of the one of the problematic psukim in the Haftarah a couple of weeks ago for Parshas Emor, when there's a pasuk in there where it says Nevela utreifa lo yochlu hakohanim. That the Kohanim
Mhm.
are not allowed to eat nevela and treifa. Like I listened to that when they were reading the Haftarah, and I was thinking, what are you saying that that the Israelim are allowed to? And that's exactly one of the reasons why they want. There are a couple of other psukim like that when they're saying about Sefer Yechezkel's a little dodgy, and um, and this Hanania ben Chizkiah ben Gurion was he wrote a whole parish on all of these problematic psukim in Yechezkel to explain what they really meant and save he basically saved the Sefer Yechezkel from being cut out of our canon. Um, so so here this that we said above these halachas that we said about not dusting out his clothes and not reading by the light of the candle. These were all written while the sages were visiting Hanani ben Chizkiah and Nimnu v'Rabu Beis Shammai al Beis Hillel. It was one of these situations where the they looked around and said, "Oh, look, there are more Beit Shammai necks over here," which is a rarity because Beis Hillel was bigger than Beit Shammai. So so they looked around and said, "Hey, we've got a majority in here. We've got a quorum. We've got enough Chachamim who are all visiting over here to make a
Right.
to make a proper vote." And they stationed the guard outside the entrance and said, "Okay, let's go. We're pasking halachas." And they found and Shmona Asar Devarim Gazru B'Bayom. There were 18 different gezeres. Now, my Kahati over here gives a list of these 18 things, which I don't think we need to go into right now. It's kind of beyond the scope of our Mishnah. But this Mishnah gives us a little bit of a peek into the fact that under the hood
Right.
that there were a lot of halachas that were pasched on that day and in which the halacha was finalized according to Beis Shammai. Okay, Speaking of Beis Shammai omrim ein shorin dio v'samamanim v'karshinim ele kadei she'yishoru mi ba'od yom. Okay, so um, you in order to get ink and other herbs and vetches edible or usable or whatever the case is, there's a certain soaking process that has to be done to them. Now, of course, what does the soaking process involve? It involves you throwing it into the water and leaving it. Okay, so what's the malacha is that you're putting these things into water in order to change their form, in order to do some improvement to them. Okay, and Beis Shammai say you shouldn't do this close to Shabbos because it's going to turn out that the
Right.
malacha is going to carry on being done into Shabbos. And
Mm.
Beis Hillel say nothing doing. Your malacha was putting it in. Thereafter, you're not part of the process anymore. And once you're not part of the process anymore, we don't consider that you're doing the malacha. It's just happening by itself. So Beis Hillel will say this is mutar, and we'll see a couple more cases in the next Mishnah. Beis Shammai omrim ein nosnin unin shel pishtan nesochatanor. You can't take the flax that has already been soaked and put it into the oven. Ele kadei sheyahavilu mibod yom as only if they'll be dried out while before Shabbos comes in. You cannot put the wool into the pot for dyeing unless it's got enough time to absorb the coloration before Shabbos. Or Beis Hillel Materian, again, your part in this action stopped when you put it in and you walked away and everything else happens by itself. Beis Shammai omrim, ein porsin metzudos chaya v'ofos v'dagim, ele kedei sheyitzodu mibod yom. You can't set traps before Shabbos because the animals will become trapped during Shabbos. So what you have to do is, if you want to set a trap on Friday, is you have to set up a small trap in such a way that you're confident that it'll catch whatever animals it's going to catch before Shabbos and no more, because the small traps that can't trap more animals than would fit in there before Shabbos. And again, Beis Hillel Material, your act in this was to set up the traps. As long as that act is done before Shabbos, whatever happens on Shabbos is not your business.
So in the case of the ink, in the case of the flax, in the case of um, the wool, even though the process is going to come taking it out, you can take it out, but the process is going to be completed by you taking it out.
I'm going to stop short of saying that you can take it out, because there are other concerns, like if something's soaked in water and now you're going to squeeze it out, or
Right, right.
the other, but that's kind of um, that's a secondary thing. And it's another shiloh, how can you take it out? Would you be able to take it out? And maybe it's muktzah. Maybe it's muktzah
Right, right. That's what I was
because
thinking.
it wasn't ready before Shabbos. But again, muktzah is just Rabbanan.
Right.
Right, we're talking here about halacha of melacha. And
I
melacha,
wonder, Rav, one time I heard Rav say, "Don't say it's just malacha. I mean, it's just
just muktzah.
rabbanim, just rabbanim. It's not, we all buy rabbanim, many
Of course,
things.
no, we keep halachas derabanan, but when we're having a discussion on a doraisa level, we try to keep the discussion on the doraisa level. And
Right,
there are many times when we're having discussions in Mishnah, and you've got to put on your derabanan glasses and you've got to put on your doraisa glasses, and
right, right. Okay, we're into Bikurim.
yeah.
Um, right. Okay. The koi is in some ways like an undomesticated animal, and in some ways like cattle. And in some ways it is like cattle and like an undomesticated animal. And in some ways it is neither like cattle nor like an undomesticated animal. All right. How is it like an undomesticated animal? Its blood must be covered like the blood of an undomesticated animal, and it may not be slaughtered on a festival day. But if he did slaughter it, his blood is not covered. Its chaylev conveys carry on uncleanness like an undomesticated animal, and its uncleanness is in doubt, and one may not redeem it with a firstborn donkey. How is it like cattle? Its caleb is forbidden with the caleb of cattle, and one is not liable to carrot for it, and it may not be brought with the Maisa Sheni money to be eaten in Yerushalayim, and is subject to the shoulder, the two cheeks, and the moa. But Reb Eliezer exempts, for the burden of proof lies on the claimant.
Okay.
Kisei Adam, it says, if you can't because you can't cover it, but the Kisei, if you prepare Kisei Adam beforehand,
Hmm.
you can do it then.
If you had prepared, okay, so right, so if you had prepared the stand beforehand,
Right.
then you're generally allowed to shecht a behemoth or at least a chaya or an off, which require kisvei adam. But in this particular case, the because the koi is of doubtful
Doubtful.
status, if people see you doing kisvei adam on the koi, they'll say, "Oh, it's a chaya." Therefore, the chalev is mutar.
Right, right, right.
So that's the
Our side.
that's the lomdus we're worried that people will take.
Nechala, olive base. If one eats of them an olive's bulk of matzah on Pesach, he has fulfilled his obligation. An olive's bulk of chametz is he's liable to charas. If one of them became mixed up with other kinds, it is transgression on Pesach. If one vows to abstain from bread and tuvia, they are forbidden to him. So Reb Meir. But the comments say if one vows to abstain from dagan, he is prohibited from these only, and they are liable to challah and maasros. These are liable to challah but are exempt from maasros. Lechet, shikacha, peah, hefka, and maaser rishon, from which its truma had been set aside. Maaser sheni and hegdish, which has been redeemed, the remains of the omer, and produce which has not reached a third of its growth. If Eliezer says produce which has not reached a third of its growth is exempt from challah. These are liable to maasros but are exempt from challah. Rice, millet, poppy seeds, poppy seeds, sesame, pulse, and less than 4/5 of grain. Sponge cakes, honey cakes, paste balls, pancakes, and meduma are exempt from challah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Shavias. Okay. Gimel base. How
Aleph,
much would
not Aleph.
Aleph? I keep on a hand on the left side.
Mhm.
But when from when on may manure be taken into the dung heaps? When those who work have ceased to work. So says Rav Meir, but Rav Yehuda says when the sweetening is dried up. Rav Yossi says when it forms knots. How much manure may be deposited? Up to 3 dung heaps in a beitzah, each containing 10 basket loads of one letket each. And one may increase the number of baskets, but not the number of dung heaps. And Rav Shimon says also the number of dung heaps. A man may set up in his field 3 dung heaps per bait saw, per one bait saw. If more, he must set them out in a triangle. So says Reb Shimon. But the Chachamim forbid unless he lowers 3 or raises 3. A man may pile his manure into one large heap. Man forbids unless he lowers 3 or raises 3. But if he has but little, he may go on adding to it. And with Eliezer ben Ari, it says forbids unless he lowers 3 or raises 3 or places it on a rock. Okay. Here it's a tough gimel. If a domesticated animal, a wild animal, drank from Mekatas, it's invalid. All birds invalidate Mekasa except for a dove because it sucks. No Shiratzim invalidate Mekatas except for a weasel because it laps. If Gamil says a snake also invalidates Mekatas because it spits. If Eliezer says a mouse also invalidates Mekatas. If someone decides to drink Mekatas, Reb Eliezer says it is disqualified. Rabbi Yeshua says it becomes disqualified when he tilts the barrel. Rabbi Yossi said, when are these things said? With regard to unconsecrated water, but with regard to consecrated water, Rabbi Eliezer says it becomes disqualified when he tilts the flask. And Rabbi Yeshua says it becomes disqualified when he drinks. And if he poured the water directly into his throat, the remaining mekatas is valid. Remaining mekatas that became disqualified, one may not mix into mortar, and now want to make it a stumbling block for others. Rabbi Yeshua says it's nullified. Regarding a cow that drank mekatas, its flesh is tummy for a period of 24 hours. Rabbi Yehuda says the mekatas is nullified in the cow's intestines. Okay. Tzivachim. Okay. Yud Aleph. Whatever is more frequent than another precedes the other. The Talmud offerings precede the Musaf offerings, the Sabbath Musaf offerings precede the Rosh Chodesh Musaf offerings, and the Rosh Chodesh Musaf offerings precede the Rosh Hashanah Musaf offerings, as it is said, beside the morning Ola offering, which is continual Ola offering, you offer these. Whatever is more sacred than another precedes the other. The blood of Katas offering precedes the blood of an Ola offering because it affects atonement. The limbs of an Ola offering precedes the sacrificial parts of a Katas offering because they're entirely consigned to the altar's fires. A Katas offering precedes an Asham offering because its blood is applied to the 4 horns of the altar and upon the base. And an Asham offering precedes a total offering and a Nazir's ram because it is the most holy offering. The total offering of the Nazir's ram precede a shalom offering because they must be eaten in one day and they require loaves of bread. Shalom offerings precede a bakah offering because they require a fourfold blood application to the altar, leaning, libations, and a way of the breast and the waving of the breast and high. The bakah offering precedes the masa offering because it sanctifies a bird and is eaten by Kohanim. The Misa offering precedes bird offerings because it is slaughtered, and if it has parts which are most holy, its blood it has parts which are most holy, its blood and sacrificial parts. Okay. Um, Bird offerings precede mikvah offerings because they're in
Uh,
the category. That was it. I finished. Right. Third. It was over. Okay. All right. I was going on to Galbus.
are you in the middle of one?
I was in the, I was doing Dalit.
What?
I
Oh,
think I
wait, hold on a
went too
second.
far. I'm
Okay, sorry, my
do Dalit.
wonky. We finished before Dalid.
Right. Okay. Good. Okay. All
Okay.
right. Katsubas. Yud Gimel base. If someone overseas and someone else came forward and supported his wife, Kanan says he lost his money. The sons of the Kohanim Gedolim differed from him and said, "Let him swear how much he spent and recover it." Reb Dosa ben Harkinis concurred with the view and said, Yochanan ben Zakkai. Kanan said, "Well, he's squandered his money." Admon says seven. If one dies and leaves sons and daughters, in the event that there is much property, the sons inherit and the daughters are supported. And if there is little property, the daughters are supported and the sons must go begging. Admon says, because I'm a male, do I lose? Said Rabbi Gamliel, I approve of Admon's view. If one claims vessels of oil from another, and he admits to the vessels, Admon says, since he has admitted to part of the claim, he must swear. The sages, however, say this is not an admission of the same kind of the claim. Said Rabbi Gamliel, I approve of Admon's view.
Okay,
Okay.
are we done?
Good.
Okay, have
Oh, man.
a
The week
lovely
goes so
day.
fast. I can't believe it's